So this next psychologist is probably one of the most popular psychologists, and not to mention the most controversial. Okay, so the focus of his work is more on the importance of the unconscious. And he said, the mind is like an iceberg in which only the tip of the iceberg, which is just 1/7 of the total bulk of our mind, is the conscious part. So that most part of our mind is composed of the unconscious. And that is the main topic or the main theory of Sigmund Freud, and that is the importance of the unconscious. Okay, so here we've discussed about his id, ego, and superego theory since the philosophical perspective. But anyhow, this is just a recap since we've discussed about this in the past or in our previous lessons. So, of course, the construction of the self and personality, according to Freud, are the three, which are the id, the ego, and the superego. So the id is the pleasure-seeking, immature, impulsive, childlike, and cannot delay gratification part of our personality. Okay, so the second is the ego or the I, which works on the reality principle, controls the id, and can delay pleasure. And the third is the superego, which is the conscious and moral judge of conduct. However, these three are working together. So as an example, let's take a look at this figure. Okay, so here the id says, I need to eat right this second. And the ego says, you can't do that because you're in the middle of an important meeting. Okay, so superego, on the other hand, will say, eating during an important meeting is rude and inappropriate. So the ego has no concept of right or wrong, actually. Something is good simply if it achieves its end of satisfying without causing harm to itself or to the id. So it engages in secondary process thinking, which is rational, realistic, and oriented towards problem solving. So judgment comes into play with the superego, of course. So with this, Freud believed that there were conflicts between the id, your natural impulses, and the superego, which is the moral principle, or what the society says it's okay or is okay, and the ego, which is the reality principle, or what you end up doing. So, how these conflicts are resolved or not resolved in some cases can actually affect future development, according to Freud. Specifically, unresolved conflicts can lead to what Freud called fixation. And so, talking about fixation, Freud proposed the 5 stages of psychosexual development. So, he said that our personality is fully developed by 5 or 6 years of age, and he believed that personality development is sequential and progresses through a series of 5 stages. These 5 stages include the oral, the anal, the phallic, latency, and the genital stage. So let's discuss each of the stage of development or psychosexual development of Freud. So oral stage, this is around birth up to 1 year. So in this stage, infants operate solely on id or the pleasure principle because they do not have an ego or superego yet. So during this stage, the child or the infant has no concern about what other people will say or what other people will feel because they are focused or too focused on gratifying what they want. Okay, of course, the ego or the id is working in the infant. Okay, so there are consequences of an oral fixation that if you are not able to resolve conflicts during each stage of the psychosexual development, there will be consequences and which will result to fixation. So, oral aggressive and oral passive are the two consequences na pwede mahinabo when there is or there are conflicts stage hini. So, magiging result is chewing an object for oral aggression, chewing on objects such as pens or t-shirt colors. So while oral passive, taking up oral activities such as smoking, eating, drinking, or kissing. So Freud believed that individuals in an oral fixation may have a passive or manipulative personality. This is now the part where good parental practice comes in. When parents, especially mothers, try to win the child from what they call this feeding through bottle or breastfeeding through aggressive acts. According to Freud, there is a negative effect in later development of the child. Okay, so there are two consequences. Pwede maging oral aggressive and pwede maging oral passive. Remember that. Okay, so the next stage, according to Freud, in his psychosexual development is the anal stage. So, toilet training is the primary task of this stage. It involves a competition between the id impulses, which is, example, if you want to go to the bathroom, so that is controlled by the id, so, and the ego, nga nag-iisip nga I have to control myself, otherwise I will be soiling my pants and that is embarrassing. Okay, so here, parents who overemphasize toilet training and cleanliness during the toilet training stage may have a child that Freud could call anal retentive or obsessed with cleanliness. Okay, so duduha ito hiya. Anal retentive and anal repulsive. So here, maybe I should have done a better job toilet training when you see that your child is acting differently or medyo diri maupay ang behavior. So on the other hand, Freud believed that children who struggle with toilet training may have difficulty controlling their impulses and can often get in trouble in. Okay, so the third stage is the phallic stage, which is around 3 to 6 years of age, and the focus here is the genitals. Okay, so Freud argued that during this stage, boys see their father as their competition for the affection of their mothers. He defines the attraction that boys have for their mother as the Oedipus complex. Here, males view father as competition for affection from mother. But of course, Freud said that the reason males did not express their attraction to their mother with their father is because of the fear that their larger father will castrate them. So Freud defined this as castration anxiety. Okay? So they only see their father as their competition in the affection of their mothers. So here, Freud believed that boys who get fixated or stuck in Oedipus in the phallic stage may be aggressive or jealous as adults. And the counterpart naman of Oedipus complex is the Electra complex, which is kumbaga the situation or the complex wherein girls are attracted to their fathers and see their mothers as competition. So Electra complex is for female children according to Freud, and Oedipus complex is for male children. So a very controversial and what many would have believed to be a sexist belief that Freud had is that girls develop what Freud calls penis envy, wherein girls get jealous of boys that they do not have a penis. However, some psychologists countered this one and said that it's not actually the penis that the girls envy, but probably the strength or the masculinity of the father. Okay, so Freud believed that the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex were repressed from our conscious mind, so we don't think about it. However, these concepts were criticized because they are sexist and also not supported or testable by research. Okay, so the fourth stage is the latency, which is around 6 through puberty. And latency stage is one where there are no conflicts. The child is learning hobbies, developing friendships, and growing. Any abnormal behavior could be perceived to be attributed to what occurred during earlier stages of development. Kasi the focus here is not the body of the child, but the socialization or the activities that entail other people in the child's life. The fifth stage is the genital stage, which is from puberty through adulthood, and psychological detachment and independence from parents exhibit in this stage. So there are attempts to resolve issues that were caused during earlier stages of development comes into play during this stage. So if we can notice, only the first three stages of Freud's psychosexual development are very crucial rather. This is just a summary of the five stages of psychosexual development by Freud. So the stages oral, which is from birth to 1 year, and the focus is the mouth, the lips, and the tongue. And major development task for parents is weaning, because if the child is not properly weaned, then there are characteristics of adults that is fixated at this stage, such as oral aggression. If the result will be chewing gum, nail biting, and others. Oral passiveness naman will lead to smoking and overeating or drinking. In stage 2, the anal, which is around 1 to 3 years, the focus of the libido is the anus, and the major development task for caregivers is the toilet training, because if kumbaga din nagmamatter if the child will be later expulsive, or will have an anal expulsive personality or anal retentive personality, depending on the toilet training, the success or failure of toilet training. So for anal expulsive personality, the child will later become disorganized, messy, or careless. For anal retentive naman, they will become manipulative, orderly, rigid, and obsessive. And in the phallic stage, which is around 3 to 6, the focus is the genitals. And the major development task here is resolving the Oedipus and Electra complex. So some characteristics of adults fixated at this stage is vanity, recklessness, sexual dysfunction, or deviancy. And in the fourth stage of psychosexual development, which is the latency, around 6 to 12 years, there is no focus of the libido, because the focus is more on developing defense mechanisms and identifying with same-sex peers. So there is no fixation here. And the last stage is the genital, which is around 12 years up to adulthood. Back to genitals and focus here. And the major development task is achieving mature sexual intimacy, which leads to adults who have successfully integrated earlier stages should emerge with sincere interest in others and mature sexuality. And of course, according to Freud, if you are not able to resolve this one, or if there are conflicts, what he calls a defense mechanisms, or a defense mechanism arise. Okay, so what are defense mechanisms? Kasi sa ring ni Freud, if there are conflicts within ourselves, the tendency is we develop anxiety, and of course our selves reaction to lessen or to prevent anxiety is to develop defense mechanisms. So these are strategies we use unconsciously to protect ourselves from anxiety arising from unacceptable thoughts or feelings, according to Freud. So there are a lot of defense mechanisms that Freud mentioned. However, we will only focus on the 10. These are the most common ones. Okay, so the first is denial. I know you are familiar with this one because this is very common. Denial is a defense mechanism wherein there is a refusal to recognize threatening situation. So for instance, if a loved one is or passed away, you tend, or you automatically tend to deny the idea. No, it's not true. He just you are just pranking me, or you are just telling me lies, so something like that. Okay, so next is repression, pushing threatening situations out of conscious memory. So, if there are situations in your life that you do not really want to remember, repression as a defense mechanism comes into play, wherein you push threatening situations, or you try to not really forget, because you can't forget these threatening situations or the memories of these threatening situations. You only keep them in the unconscious, wherein it is not there is no easy access for it. Okay, the third is rationalization, making up acceptable excuses for unacceptable behavior. So an example of rationalization is, let's say, you failed an exam, and then the real reason why you failed the exam is that you did not study. Okay, however, ikaw, to avoid the anxiety or to lessen anxiety, you rationalize. Masaring ka, um, I was not able to pass the exam because the teacher did not like me. So he or she gave me a low grade or low mark or a failing grade. Okay, so that is rationalization. Projection is placing one's own unacceptable thoughts onto others. Thinkers are doers. So you are doing something wrong. An example is that you are doing something wrong, and then you try to project the wrongdoing to others. Like, ito hiya, masaring ka example, imo boyfriend or imo girlfriend, masaring ka you're cheating. You're cheating because you are blah blah blah, you are blah blah blah. When in fact you are the one cheating. You're just trying to project the unacceptable thought onto other people to lessen the anxiety. Okay, next is reaction formation. So in this defense mechanism, one condemns something that has an unconscious appeal. Okay, so uncorrected reaction formation. So for instance, you have a group mate in your thesis or research that do not really or that does not really help you at all. So instead of being anxious or being stressed about the idea that your classmate does not help you, you try to believe what the classmate believes also, like nasaring or trying to tell you nga masaring nga diri ako nakakabulig kay ini nga akon family na nabulig ako amon livelihood so kaliton. So kay ano, nagka kami ada ka reaction formation because an imo sangkay ito imo classmate is too nice. Kumbaga you cannot hate that person because he or she is too nice. That is why you try to believe nga you tend to believe or you try to believe na talaga nabuligyan niya livelihood even though it is contrary or against your belief. Displacement is a transfer of emotions or behaviors to another less threatening subject. So this is very common. So for instance, nag-away ka mo imo sangkay or nag-away ka mo imo boyfriend or girlfriend. Of course, dili mo man pwede nga you cannot hit your boyfriend or your girlfriend. So bad trip ka, pag uli mo ibalay nakitaan mo imo ayam. You kicked your dog and you kumbaga imo gin transfer and imo anger nga don imo dog because the dog is kumbaga less threatening or diri ha imo maato. So there is a displacement of negative emotions. Okay, regression is falling back on childhood or childlike patterns as a way of coping with stressful situations. So for instance, you are too stressed and you are too kumbaga saring pa preoccupied with a lot of activities in school plus ano pa activities or house chores that you need to accomplish at home. Ano mo ginihimo, you cry like a child to lessen the anxiety. You cry like a child tapos imo ginhinangkupan na lang imo teddy bear to kumbaga to lessen the anxiety that you are feeling. Okay? So that is regression, falling back on childhood patterns. Okay, identification is trying to become like someone else to deal with one's anxiety. So identification is actually like imitating someone. So for example, you are idolizing someone, you dress up and you talk like them or you eat what they are eating too. So that is identification. The next is compensation. So trying to make up for areas in which a lack is perceived by becoming superior in some. So the classic example for this is Jose Rizal. So Jose Rizal is very famous aside from being our national hero. So he has this sarig pa charisma with girls. Kaya damo ito tiya chicks based on history. Pero if you're going to look at the definition of the physical attributes of Jose Rizal, he is not really that normal. Kumbaga, he has big head, nga diri hiya proportion ha iya body and he is standing 4'11 and then it iya hit to shoulder is medyo diri it hiya pantay. So he is probably or diri kita nagsisaring nga totally amo to pero an example is he overcompensate other areas of himself kay may dahiya lacking physically. That is why he's considered as a genius. Probably there are other reasons, pero unconsciously, this might be one of the reasons why he is so great. Probably because he want to compensate the lack, kumbaga, the part of his being nga nagkukulang hiya. And finally, we have sublimation, wherein turning socially acceptable urges into socially acceptable behaviors. So, pwede ini ang mga athletes. So, for example, Manny Pacquiao, probably this is how he releases his anxiety nga hambata pa hiya kakastig uhihat iya tatay plus gimbayaan haran irat ang iya tatay. Of course, you cannot just hit your father. Then, iyahayagin convert nga to something socially acceptable, which is boxing. Because in boxing, you can hit people legally. Okay? So, there, And these are the defense mechanisms by Freud.